Welcome to the Radically Genuine podcast. I am Dr. Roger McFillin. I have spent years immersed in a system that attempts to categorize human suffering into neat diagnoses and prescribe standardized treatments and drugs. I believe many well-intentioned efforts have occurred, and of course, not so well-intentioned efforts to try to diagnose and quote-unquote treat trauma. And many of those, I think, are limiting of our understanding of the human spirit's capacity for transformation. What if, in our rush to pathologize pain, we're overlooking the profound wisdom and growth that can emerge from life's most challenging experiences? I've had the privilege of walking alongside individuals who have endured unspeakable traumas. Time and time again, I've witnessed something extraordinary. These survivors often emerge as some of the wisest, most compassionate people I've encountered. Their journeys don't fit neatly into diagnostic categories or treatment protocols. Instead, they reveal the awe-inspiring potential for human beings to transform suffering into profound insight and purpose. In fact, their experiences help us move beyond the clinical model of trauma and recovery, and how the experience itself can be a catalyst for spiritual awakening, how pain can birth empathy, and how the darkest moments of our lives can lead to an expanded capacity for love and connection. I was recently a guest on Allie Beth Stuckey's Relatable podcast, released on July 10th. On the podcast, I revealed the story of a sex trafficking survivor I worked with who experienced a profound spiritual awakening when she was visited by God during a series of traumatic sexual assaults and violence. He turned everything into love and allowed her to see her perpetrator's own violent histories, which allowed her to develop compassion. She was essentially protected against the horrific consequences of such horror, and instead it led to a transformation in her life. I rarely do this, but I decided to check out some of the comments when the Relatable podcast was released on YouTube and came across today's guest. You can say it's a coincidence, a synchronicity, or divine intervention, but I was exposed to her work and read one of the most powerful memoirs I've ever been exposed to. Her name is Lindsay Gibson, and her first book, Just Be: How My Stillborn Son Taught Me to Surrender, won the Book Excellence Finalist Award in 2018. She's been featured in Elephant Journal, Green Child Magazine, and Self Magazine. She does a number of other things, which I'm sure we'll get into. As I was telling her before we hit record, it came to last night and I had yet to read the memoir. I was actually exposed to her work through other things she's done, reading her website, and had a good idea about, what had happened, but I didn't really get into the memoir until yesterday. I read it all last night, woke up at 4:30 in the morning to continue reading it. It was compelling. I found myself in tears, but also experienced profound hope and joy. Her experience is not new to me, as it mimics the experience of others I have worked with who survived trauma. These stories are not prevalent in our mainstream news. They're not going to be taught to medical professionals. They're certainly not part of the curriculum for clinical psychologists, professional counselors, and therapists. Yet these stories must be told. These conversations must be had. Not sure exactly where this conversation is going to take us today, but I admire her courage for writing the memoir and her willingness to come on today and speak about it. Lindsay Gibson, welcome to the Radically Genuine podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Let me just first kind of ask the question. You decided to comment on the YouTube video for the podcast for Allie Beth. Are you typically somebody who watches Allie Beth's podcast or listens to it? How'd you get exposed to it, and what led you to just comment?
I have watched quite a few of her shows, and I've enjoyed many of them. So I could say that I'm a regular with watching what she puts on. And I came across her by a friend who sent me one of her earlier shows. I think it was about maybe 6 months ago. And so ever since then, I've just been watching, and I really enjoy the different perspectives that she puts up, and the different guests that she has on. She really has a wide range, I think, of different interviews and different topics that she covers. And so when I watched your episode, I was hooked. I was absolutely hooked because of some of the things that were spoken about. I could definitely relate to with my own story.
So you felt compelled to write in the comment section. Do you typically do that? I
have in the past with other shows, but it's not something I do every time. And I just felt really drawn to do it. And like I said, I recognize some of the things that were spoken about because I experienced them myself. And I wanted to comment just so others could see that there is hope, so that's why I did.
Yeah, I'm so glad you did, because I would have never been exposed to you.
Right.
So your book starts out, and I think it's compelling right from the beginning, because I think you're 11 years old, and you're speaking to your experiences as an 11-year-old girl, and some of the things that you had gone through, as far as like maybe this connection you have to a spiritual world and how information is provided to you. Can we start at the beginning and get a sense of what it was like for you when you were a young girl?
Absolutely. Yes. One of the things that I noticed about myself as far back as I can remember is that I always had a hunch or a gut feeling before things would happen. And as a young girl, I always thought they were stomach aches. So I would always go running to my mom and I would say, I have a stomach ache. And she'd be like, oh, okay, because she knew it wasn't actually a stomach ache most of the time. And she would have me sit down, drink some water, and then she'd say, what are you feeling? And she would try to help me link those stomach aches to, this bodily sensation to a feeling. And as a little girl, I was like, I'm not sure. It was hard for me to understand. But then something would happen, whether it was something small or something big. And I would say, I had a stomach ache right before that. So it kind of became a theme in my family, starting as far back as I can remember, maybe the age of 6. So, and it happened often. So I was definitely in tune to my body. Just didn't understand it, as a child.
As if you were alerted to something that was about to occur, like a message that you were feeling. Maybe it was energy that you were able to experience, but it's almost like you knew, and you actually open it up, the book, by talking about, walking into your home and your parents informing you that they were going to separate.
Yes. And I wasn't feeling good right before that. I also would have dreams, very, very vivid dreams, to where, we've all experienced vivid dreams, but mine almost felt like I'd wake up confused. I'm like, wait, was I asleep? Was that a dream? That's how vivid it would be. And I remember, and I did not share this part, but the night before that happened, I walked into my parents' room my mom was the only one in there. It was like 4:00 in the morning, and I got into bed and I woke her up and I said, is Daddy moving out? And she wanted just to put me back to sleep because it was so early in the morning. And then later on, as you read in the story, that's exactly what they were about to tell us.
So it seems in a lot of ways, this was a little bit more of a burden, kind of a curse, than anything necessarily that you saw as a blessing. Is that how you experienced it?
As a small child, yes, because I felt different, and I never responded to my friends. There's drama growing up amongst friends, and as you grow, especially through middle school and high school, and I often found myself taking a back seat and just observing a lot, and I always felt different. And it kind of bothered me until I reached adulthood. Because I didn't get it. I didn't get why I couldn't respond to things like everybody else seemed to. Why gossip always made me uneasy, because it's almost like I could feel what the person they're gossiping about was feeling, and it didn't feel good. So I never wanted to participate. And so but I wanted to fit in, so it was hard for me to understand it. And I often pushed it aside, especially in my teen years.
So I am curious to know how you think about it now as an adult.
I definitely understand what it is now. I understand how I am. I think we're always growing and learning who we are all the way through our entire lives. So I can't say I know myself fully yet. But I definitely understand how to, it sounds maybe a little strange, but protect myself from diving in too much as an empath, because it could really start to make me feel sick, just like I did as a child. And so I often find myself, and I'm a writer, so everybody says, you're a fiction writer, you're a recluse anyway. But I really enjoy my alone time, and because that's when I reflect. So if I meet people, or I hear about something, or a friend calls me because they have a problem, or I'm dealing with something, because I have 3 daughters, I always find myself going by myself so I can really absorb it and understand it. I didn't have those skills or those tools growing up. So I'm okay with it now. I've learned how to handle it.
I don't know how much you are connected to the greater mental health world, but one of the things that I think occurs in our modern culture is we pathologize people who experience their emotions intensely. And people who are like you can use the word empaths, but I see it as this amazing gift where you do have the ability to tap into the energy of those around you, to feel what others feel. And when it's harnessed in a direction that can serve yourself and serve others, I do see it as a powerful blessing. But often, just like when you were younger, there's like this judgment of the experience, like I'm different, or it's a burden, or it's too much. And then you enter into the medical system, and the medical system is kind of communicated in the same way. Like we now uniquely view mental health as somehow the absence of any intense emotion. Yeah. And some of that intense emotion, as you so artfully communicate throughout your memoir, are powerful in this transformative journey for you. And I just want to get before we get into your story, I am kind of interested to your thoughts and like how the general mental health and medical system, has traditionally thought about someone like you and what you experience.
I have always had a very hard time finding a therapist that could really listen and understand what I was trying to convey and how I was trying to convey it and explain myself. I did end up finding one, and I do acknowledge her at the end of my memoir, because she finally was able to go away from the typical, because I was finding every person I would seek help to talk to, they would just give me this same methodic answer and suggestions, and it didn't sit right. And I was like, are you listening to me? Are you hearing me? Because everybody sounds kind of like a robot. And I don't want to speak poorly about people, but that's what it felt like. Everybody's giving me the same, like they're reading from a textbook. And I never connected to anybody until this one therapist finally, it's like she didn't even go by it at all. And she was able, and this was right after I lost my son. So I really needed somebody to talk to. And she got it. She got it finally.
Yeah. And was that part of the process for your healing? Did the therapy itself assist you in that?
It was one part, because talk therapy, in my opinion, it can only go so far, and it only went so far. It definitely was needed during, at the time, but it was only one of the many healing modalities that I've done.
Okay. Well, let's start it off. I think we should probably start in chronological order, although your book is not in chronological order.
It's not. Sorry.
No, I mean, that was the beauty of it. And that's what made it so compelling, is the way it was written. But
I had a memoir coach, and she's written many books herself, but she's a professor, and she teaches how to write memoir. And she said, you do not have to write your memoir in order. And I was like, oh, here we go. Because I thought that was fun.
It was. Let's just start with, age 16. And if you can kind of just start there and tell the audience your story.
So my mother at the time was a nurse at Yale New Haven Hospital. So we had to, and she was single mother at the time. My parents had divorced. And my brothers were already in college. So it was just me. And she couldn't do the commute anymore. So we had just moved to a new town, from a very tiny town to a much larger town near New Haven. And that was hard, 16 years old. And I was trying to find my way, make friends, and just accept that I'm starting in a new high school my junior year, and it's going to be okay. And I was meeting new people, and everything was going okay until that one night where I found myself. When I speak to high schools, I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. It doesn't excuse for people's behavior, but that's essentially what had happened that night before I walked into that building. And so if you'd like, I could explain what happened, or,
If you're comfortable doing so, yes.
Yes. So I was being driven home that night, and this was a girl that I had just kind of met, and we had only hung out maybe a few times, but, she was fun, and she was definitely adventurous, something that coming from a very small town, I was not used to, but I was intrigued. I was 16 years old. So I thought, she's fun. Let's hang out with her. And she had asked me that night, do you want to sneak into a club in New Haven? And I said, no. I was just way too, I said, it's a Sunday night. My mom's waiting on me to come home. So she goes, okay, I'll drive you home. So she made a stop. And she said, hold on a minute. I'm going to go inside real quick. Just stay right here. And I'm like, okay. And I didn't really know where I was yet, because like I said, I'm still getting to know this town. So I'm waiting. And I started to get nauseous, which, as you can see from our earlier discussion, there goes my intuition. But at 16 years old, I remember feeling aggravated. Like, I just want to go home. I did not have we didn't have cell phones back then. And so I couldn't call my mom to say, hey, could you just come get me? Which I wanted to do, but I had no way to do that. And she was in there for a while. And I remember, as I was thinking about going to find her, I got more and more sick to my stomach. Then I thought I was actually sick. Like, maybe I am getting sick. So I go in there. It was only a 3-floor tiny apartment building. It wasn't huge or anything. So I thought, maybe I'll hear her if I go in there, because I saw which door she went in. And I was walking towards the door, and I remember feeling extremely dizzy, like vertigo, like the world just spun. And I remember pausing outside the door, and I said, okay, I'm not feeling good. So I definitely need to go find my friend. So I rush inside. Everything in my body was screaming, stop, turn around. But I said, I just need to find my friend. I'll hear her. Maybe I'll knock on doors, because now I'm starting to get some anxiety, because I'm like dizzy. And that's when my attacker had seen me. He apparently had saw me go in, and I found myself trapped in his apartment building, and couldn't get myself out. And now I'm face to face with him. And I had come to find out he was a drug dealer. So she had been going into that building to buy drugs, I'm assuming, because I never spoke to her again after that. And if you looked at him on the street, you would never guess, because I had come to find out he was a bartender and a bouncer in New Haven, looked completely normal. You would never guess that he was a monster like that. And I was trapped in his apartment for about 3 to 4 hours before I escaped. And escaping was, again, something that was done intuitively, because it was the right moment that I literally heard the words run in my head. And I knew, this is my chance. And I ran, and he happened to be on another side of the apartment. Like, I was able to run through it and out the door before he could stop me.
Are there any details that you're unwilling to talk about as I, ask some questions?
Yeah, no, you can ask me anything.
Okay. So in that 3 to 4 hour period of time, it's somewhere along the line you were sexually assaulted by him in the 3 to 4 hours. Yes. Was that immediate? In the time frame, I'm trying to get a sense of your experience with him and also, but, your internal experience within you.